locking brothers in the poorhouse who can't afford more house. Politicians nervous, it's the only free service they provide. You wanna go inside, there's a hot meal. We can score you a deal, we can score you on a bed for a night or 2 or 3 or 4 months.
People are becoming aware that one of our boom industries in the United States is the prison industry.
Over the last couple of decades, prison spending has jumped from $2.3 billion to $31.2 billion.
We're going from corrections to collections. All we do is collect the inmates, get money from their labor. Now when you're making a call to a phone company, you think you're talking to the phone company, you're talking to an inmate.
And we have to ask ourselves, what kind of nation do we want to be, and how unacceptable, how morally repugnant our policy choices have become.
If you want to understand the quality of life of a society, look inside its prisons.
It is no mystery who these prisons are being built for, who is so-called profiting from them. It's very clear.
The prison industrial complex, the heart of it to me is actually the warehousing of human beings.
They say they're locking us up in cells to protect us from ourselves. It smells like they got another plan in storehouse, or should I say warehouse, full of niggas and other misfits that could.
They're oppressing us just because we're poor, we're disenfranchised, and we ain't got shit.
And it's a crime to be broke in America. It's a crime.
While public housing has fallen to the ground and funding for social services and education has been drastically cut in the past 20 years, there is one sector that is receiving enormous U.S. government support and funding.
The prison industrial complex is a term that refers to the exponential expansion of prisons and jails and the rising numbers of men and women prisoners from communities of color. And second, the increasingly symbiotic relationship between private corporations and the prison industry.
Thank you.
Which means that private corporations literally feed the punishment industry, and that the punishment industry yields enormous profits for private corporations.
Since the early 1980s, we at Wackenhut have been helping to shape what is now called privatized corrections through the development of modern, cost-efficient facilities.
And not just private prison corporations, not just the Corrections Corporation of America, not just Wackenhut, but TWA, right? And IBM as well.
Where do some of America's most successful people get their start? Did somebody say McDonald's?
Dell pioneered this direct way. They aren't selling me a box. They're selling a smarter way.
Be direct. Dell. Dell workstations use Intel Pentium 3 processors.
We're Body by Victoria, and all you'll see is curves. Body by Victoria, seamless, and only at Victoria's Secret.
Number 3. The reliance of many communities upon what is so euphemistically called corrections for economic vitality, particularly in the aftermath of corporate migration to the third world.
There are town council members, there are mayors, there are board of supervisor members, you name the politician, and they are there at the legislature begging for a prison to be located in their community. And why? When the copper mine closes down, we put a prison in that town because it takes up the base of unemployment for all those people that are going to lose their jobs.
And fourth, we see a mounting political influence of the correctional community. And of course, number 5, the collaboration of politicians and the dominant media in the wholesale criminalization of communities of color, and particularly youth of color, and in the representation of prisons as a catch-all solution to social problems.
We need more prisons, more jails, more courts, more prosecutors. So tonight I'm requesting altogether an almost $1.5 billion increase in drug-related federal spending on law enforcement.
It is the worst mistake that people can make to think that the issue of the prison industrial complex doesn't concern them, doesn't affect them. It most certainly does. When you understand that the prison industrial complex involves the building of prisons, you're talking about labor, you're talking about contracts and construction. When you're talking about once these prisons are built, who is going to be in those prisons, you know that it affects you and should be relevant to you. When you talk about unemployment, you should realize that it affects you because a significant aspect of the prison industrial complex is the job market. Why would an employer pay someone on the street $15 an hour when they can pay somebody in jail $1 a day?
Lower your overhead and maximize your profits by combining the advantages of tax credits and cost-effective leases. Manufacturers can take advantage of a reliable, efficient workforce in numbers that are easily adjusted to marketing opportunities and are ready to meet the needs of labor-intensive manufacturing. Other employer advantages include discounted rates on workers' compensation and no required benefits package, such as retirement pay, vacation pay, sick leave, or medical insurance.
We have industries that are making money. Their profit margins are increasing. They don't have to pay sick leave. They don't have to pay vacation pay. They don't have to pay overtime. And you're required to work.
Prisoners receive slave wages, while the California prison industry is protected from federal workplace safety laws, market rates, and bankruptcy.
The 13th Amendment did not abolish slavery, it wrote slavery into the Constitution. The 13th Amendment and the Congress that passed that knew what they were doing because we can look at the debate. What they said was that slavery could only be if people were convicted of a crime. So what had to happen was the criminalization in the popular culture and in law of the African American population.
When we look at Native people and imprisonment, we're not just talking about the state or federal pen. We've been confined through this process of colonialism in forts, orphanages, reservations, jails, prisons, you name it.
Whether you're talking about indigenous peoples, people of color, poor people, women, kids, we're seeing those whole groups being criminalized and then basically being shoved away as though they've dropped from some other planet, and we're just going to warehouse them and we're still brutalize them and then presume that somehow we're going to be safe.
The more you treat people with criminal justice, the more you need to. You can see this effect on populations. You can see this in the trajectory of individual biographies. The number one predicting indicator of whether a person will go to jail in their adult life for a long time is whether or not they go to juvenile facilities.
Instead of putting us in juvenile hall over the dumbest little things, I think that they should give us a chance, at least instead of throwing us in a group home.
And I feel that imprisonment for youth is not the way to go. I think it should be like drug rehabs, behavior, all types of programs to try to rehab our youth, not imprison them.
Since 1980, California has built 21 new prisons and only 1 new state college. In the last 10 years, the budget for corrections has increased 60%, while the higher education decreased 3%. They're pumping more and more and more dollars into prisons while taking the money directly from schools.
They're making too many jails and there's not even enough people to fit in them. They should be making schools and stuff and where people can get an education and learn how to live their life.
California spends $35,000 a year to house a juvenile in the California Youth Authority, and they spend $4,000 to $5,000 per year per student.
Public schools are so horrible.
There's no supplies. There's 50 kids per class. Everything could be, the money from prisons could be used for everything.
They decided to destroy the public education system from the bottom to the top. Roger Freeman, for example, who was President Nixon's key education advisor and who was also Governor Ronald Reagan's key education advisor, said in 1970, quote, word for word, "We are in danger of producing an educated proletariat. We have to be selective on who we allow into higher education." And President Nixon and Vice President Agnew, who hadn't yet been convicted of his crimes, went around the country giving speeches against open admissions, against, they both said there were too many blacks in American colleges and universities. We had to raise the threshold. We had to be selective on who we allowed into higher education. And if this was the same period, exactly the same period, where, as they say, they understood prison as a weapon, where they began to use the prison in a massive way to destroy the educational system and much of what we had won.
When you close open admissions, that means that 80% of the graduating high school seniors of regular high schools in New York City have no chance in hell to go to college. And what they have done is that Governor Pataki for this year is trying to build another $180 million prison, because the thing is that what happens when you have kids who barely can read at a 7th grade level, can't do math, but they're still going to graduate with 90s in high school, but because they really are inadequately prepared to go to college, because now the open admissions is closed, they cannot take the SATs and pass those tests, they cannot take the ACTs, they're not qualified to attend any other type of university. You have a population that you have to prepare to institutionalize in some way or the other.
That's what most of the inner city high schools in the United States are. They are about preparing our youth for prison.
In 1995, nationwide, states have decreased construction funds for colleges by $954 million, while increasing funds for prison construction by $926 million, almost a direct dollar for dollar out of the schools into the prisons.
They caught the last poor man on a poor man's vacation. And they cuffed him and they confiscated his stuff, and they dragged his black ass down the station and said, "Okay, streets are safe now. All your pretty white children can come out and see Spot Run." And they came out of their houses and they looked around, but they didn't see no one. My country, 'tis of thee.
No society since Nazi Germany has built so many prisons in such a short period of time. Each of those prisons is a school or a hospital that'll never be built.
In the last 10 years, we've gone from investing monies in building up our schools, in building up our public housing, in building up our welfare program, to transferring those monies and placing them into the prison system. And in the process of building up the prison industrial complex, we have not only transferred resources into that complex, but we have also made it the gatekeeper to social services. So for example, from my perspective, I see the number of mothers who are on the streets presently who are selling drugs because they're addicted to drugs and they have no access whatsoever to treatment. And for many of them, the only access and entry into treatment is actually the prison industrial complex.
And above 96th Street, they're handing out smallpox blankets so people don't freeze. The old dogs have got a new trend. It's called criminalize the symptoms while you spread the disease.
Why are people in prison? For women, most of it isn't for violent crime. It's for crimes of survival.
66% of the women who are in prison now in the state of California are there for nonviolent crimes.
All children should have some quality of life. If the mother is struggling and she cannot afford the formulas or the diapers, she will do things to provide for her children and her family. And at that point, you know, then she's in the system.
There's no language to start talking about how these are our children, our friends, they're ourselves. Instead, it's all other and them.
It's not the same going town to town since they put everyone in jail except the Cleavers and the Bradys in my country. 'Tis a they to take swings at each other on the talk show TV. Well, why don't you just go ahead, turn off the sun, 'cause we'll never live long enough to undo everything they've done to you.
If you're out of work, then it's going to lead you down to a road of crime because your family has to be taken care of somehow, and then you'll find yourself locked up in the system.
I know of a man who stole a pack of steaks because him and his mother and his brother were hungry. The value of the steaks was $5 and some cents, and he went away for 25 years to life. This man was hungry. This is a social problem.
It's cheaper to warehouse people than to take care of the social illnesses that have been created by capitalism and by imperialism.
You have the MAI and NAFTA, and you have this reality of an internationalization of capital. That capital is no longer accountable to the nations that the corporations belong to. And with that reality, what you have is an international corporate, oligarchy that basically draws labor from wherever it can get it for free and abandons domestic markets. And when they take the people here who are displaced and have no jobs, they got to put them somewhere. And that's what the prison industry is about.
Prison is fundamentally a political thing. It's about controlling these people and helping the corporate system in general reproduce itself.
The U.S. violates the most basic, the most minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners.
The distraction team in Pelican Bay, that is a team of officers, maybe 5 to 6 officers who will rush into your cell if you do not give up your tray, if they do not like what you're doing inside your cell, and they will remove you from your cell physically, violently. They will beat you down, handcuff you, put you in shackles for 8 hours, and they'll leave you there until the next shift releases you and laughs at you and uncuffs you. There is inmates with broken bones who sat in their cell, handcuffed, shackled for 8 hours with a broken shoulder, a broken arm, broken leg, behind the distraction team. That's what's going on in the prison system.
It's having a devastating effect, especially on the families, especially on our ability to organize in the communities to do the positive things that's necessary to advance civilization.
I know when I hear all this information, it just makes me mad, and I just want to get together with my overheads and just say, what can we do? What can we do to stop the tide, to make this cease?
You can help with demonstrations and public education so that more and more people can know that their tax dollars are being abused.
We cannot buy everything that's manufactured and not question where the manufacturing is coming from.
I believe that people have to get involved. They have to be aware of what's going on in prisons.
It's got to come from the grassroots. It's got to come, as the previous speakers have said, from a movement both on the inside and the outside that makes fundamental changes in our prison system.
You know, we all got to stand it together. The struggle is not asking us what gender we are or what age we are, because the baton of the cop is not going to hit us any softer because you're 16 or because you're 60.
We have to get people doing research. We have to get people doing litigation. We have to get people doing communication strategy. We have to get people doing grassroots organizing. We have to get together and make it more into some of our parts.
It's okay to be angry. You should be angry. After 500 years of this bullshit, you should be more than angry. But we want to teach you who to be angry with, because it ain't the blood wearing the red bandana down the street. It ain't the other guy living in the other zip code. It ain't the other guy that talks another language. It's the one corporate, greedy, capitalist system that needs to be torn down and sprung from the bottom all over again.
People are starting to recognize and realize that the agenda of this corporate elite that has basically disenfranchised the working people, not just of the world, but of this country, is an enemy that has got to be fought and recognized.
If we fight the policies of corporate capitalism only, if we fight their programs and policies only, but fail to challenge their power, we'll be forced to fight these same fights over and over and over again.
When our freedom becomes our priority over money, over a certain lifestyle, over a certain status, you know, then we will demonstrate the importance of our freedom, and that message will be sent loud and clear to those who think they can stomp all over our freedom and do what they want to do with us. It's past time to stop being a doormat for this system, to stop allowing these people to do whatever they want to do to us. It's past time.
We will believe in freedom shall not rest until it comes. We will believe in freedom shall not rest until
Can't hear y'all. What's up?
Till it comes, until it comes, until it comes.
If you didn't get to see this conference, and you know, it's not over because the thing is growing, believe me. And there's many numbers that are going to come on probably at the end of this video, or the captions under while you're talking to us or something like that. Take those numbers down as you're going. It's important. People's lives, and probably sometime your life or your children's lives, are going to be affected. There's 2 million people in prison in the United States, and that's going to double real soon. That's got to stop. We are not a commodity, not something that can be bought and sold. And it's a sad living inside a 5x8, believe me. There should be a better future for our children.
Over a century ago, before this vast buildup began in the punishment industry, the press asked a labor leader by the name of Samuel Gompers what labor wanted. And what did he say? He said, "We want more schoolhouses and less jails." He said, "We want more books and less arsenals, more learning and less vice, more constant work and less crime, more leisure and less greed, more justice and less revenge."